I am Mike Bell. I teach K-8 at Allen Elementary School, and on my contract it does say music teacher. Now, one of these days I'll get to do that again, which I hope to. But no, we have a good time. There's a lot going on at Allen, and I'm so blessed to be there. What if I told you you could change lives with that? Would it just pique your imagination just a little bit? And you're like, what in the world is it? It's a mini computer in itself. It's called a Bear Conductive Touchboard. And I'm going to get back to this in a second. But I've got to tell you the story that I've been riding for about 20 years now. I was fortunate enough in 1996 to start teaching at Prestonsburg High School. A bunch of high school kids. Great high school kids. And came to love them a lot. We were always doing something, seems like. But one thing that I was blessed to be associated with is the makeup of those kids. It wasn't all just a high-level functioning kids. There was special needs kids in that room too. And one thing that I really wanted more than anything was success for all of them. Maybe I had to manipulate something to make it work to where they can come out of there going, that was one of the coolest things I ever did in my life. So I took that when I came to the elementary school. I was very active at the high school. And when I came down there, I went from seniors to kindergarten. And I realized the only difference between the two is size. Mentality's the same, okay? So I learned that real quick. So the first year, I wanted to be as active as possible with these kids. Wanted to give them every opportunity to perform. And one thing that I realized was when you're really young, and you guys can go back when you're 5 and 6, didn't you just love to get up and dance and sing and move and all that? Probably. Most of the time we do, and then we sort of outgrow it. But one thing that I realized was there's some population of our students that can't vocalize that to us sometimes. So over the next few years, I would always include my special needs kids. But I was real disappointed in how I was including them because I didn't feel like they were getting the opportunity to perform their way. Their aides would do a lot of hand over hand. So if we were doing motions, they were doing motions, but it wasn't them. If we were hitting a drum, there was a lot of hand over hand. So I kept just pushing this, and I'm like, how can we do this to where they can perform their way? And if that's laying in the floor, it's laying in the floor. If it's in a wheelchair, it's in a wheelchair. If it's standing up, it's standing up. So I started doing STOP about 3 or 4 years ago. And one thing that I challenged the kids was I always had this desire of figuring out a way to get these kids to perform just like everybody else. Because even though they may not be able to vocalize it or go, whoa, that was one of the coolest things that I did, something changes when they do. And it could just be a smile on their face, or it could be just a hoop and a holler, or it could just be a jump up and down. So last year, we finally come across this little device. And this little device changed lives last year. For about $150, we got a kit. And it came in a box like this. And inside that kit was this little mini computer. There was some cables in there. And there was also some electrical paint. I was like, electrical paint? What in the world? And when I did my research, a little tube of electrical paint, about 10 milliliters, was about $25. And I was like, oh my word. But it was set up to where when you connected this to that and you touched it, the whole ball game changed. For these kids, something that seemed impossible became very possible. And it was one of the coolest things we had ever seen in our life. And not only did it change their lives, because they got to now have a voice in by either touching, brush it up against it, or even if they put their hand over it, we could set the proximity on it to where even if they come within 6 inches of it, something triggered. So it didn't matter if they had the use of their hands, if they had some kind of wiggle, if they had some kind of motion, if they could just stand, or if they could just sit and roll over, they were performing. Well, not only did it just totally opened their world up, it did to my 8th grade STLP students. Man, these kids were like, hey, Mr. Bell, can I get a class? I need to go to the special needs room. We got to work on this project. Listen, these kids spent days knowing these kids. They would go in and they would look at, they would observe what they like to do. And they would come back and they would say, hey, so-and-so loves to play with this glove that's got water in it and just loves to flip it. And they said, what if we do this? So what they would do, this thing works with any conductive material. You could plug it into an orange and touch the orange, and it works. Well, we realized that the water and this little rubber glove became a conductive material. They could clip it on and touch the glove, and it worked. Every time she picked it up, it made a noise. Well, we started researching, we started looking around, and we were like, how in the world can we get these kids to perform with this technology? So we kept rolling over, and through GarageBand, there's a MIDI setting on it. Well, when you take the cable and you run from this device into the computer, it connects with GarageBand. And we would lay down a drum track in the back. So last year we did a show called Disney's Enchanted Forest. Well, their part was Fantasia, where things that seem impossible become possible. So when they got in there, they came in, and I made a purpose. We practiced 2 or 3 times, and I made a point. I said, now, aides, I know you're not used to this, but take a step back. If you see that they need you, jump in. But if they don't, let them do whatever they want to do. Well, the kids designed all of our little touch pads and things that connected to this board so they could be broken or so it could be indispensable. But one thing we found out is they produce music like nobody has ever had in our building. Was it organized like, oh, everybody playing at the same time? No, because these kids performed their way. And they hit when they wanted to hit. They rubbed across it when they wanted to rub across it. Heck, they even picked it up and shook it. But you know what? They did it their way. And what we found out was when you lay the drum track underneath, there's your constant beat. Well, we realized that as these kids kept playing, some of them got on the beat. But you know what? It wasn't about that. It was about them standing in front of 500 people and performing. So one thing that we didn't realize at the time, we do day shows for our students, and then we bring in all the parents at night, just for safety reasons, so everybody's got a seat. But what was really, really cool was after they performed that night, after the show was over, I had this grandmother come down, and she was just sobbing. I mean, she was just flat out sobbing. And I was like, oh, are you okay? Is everything? She said, I had no clue what I was getting ready to see tonight. She said, he struggles so much. But what I saw him do tonight was just pure joy. And she said, I thought I was coming to see him, somebody move his arm up and move it down. She said, I didn't. She said, he performed like every other kid in this building. And that's why we do what we do. There was success. We finally, after 20 plus years of me being in the classroom, I finally got to see total inclusion from every child in our building. And we sit back and we're like, oh, we can't do that. We can't. Well, yeah, we can do it. We just have to figure out how to do it. And that's one thing with this grant. We started the program last year. Well, one board, in the packet's going to be about $150. But when we had the opportunity to get $1,000, I was telling my kids, I said, we're putting it on steroids. And we're going to take this program to a new level. So not only can we actually allow them to perform however they would like, but there's other ways that they may be able to too. Can we trick out a wheelchair? Yeah. We found some Bluetooth devices that does the same thing. We don't have to wire it to anything. Heck, we can just wire it to the chair. Those are the type of things that have pushed me more than anything. You know, one, being married to an occupational therapist, that changes your world in a great way. And with her pushing me and saying, you got to do something for those kids because they're no different than the one that can go out there and do a solo. That's why I do what I do. That's why this program is so important. And hopefully, I hope you all steal it. I really do. And let your students rock their worlds, but not just theirs. Change their parents' lives. Because sometimes that's what those parents need, because they have struggled so much. And if you can give them 30 seconds to a minute of, oh my gosh, there's not a problem, you made it. That's my presentation. Questions?